Hey guys, welcome to A.F.C. Curtis. I'm Curtis, and I have as a very special guest here, Mr. Mike Miller from the Premier Podcast, one of the biggest podcasts in the Canadian soccer community right now. It's red hot. He's dropping an episode every single day. He's like Oprah, and every single day as a person. It's like you get an episode, you get an episode, you get an episode. Not only this, but Mike, how's it going, Mike?
I'm fine. How are you, Curtis?
I'm happy you got the memo. The memo that we're gonna dress the same with both wearing red shirts. Oh, there you go. There's the logo right there, guys. So if you've seen that logo before, here's the face of the voice. You can match it there. And today we have a very special video here. We're gonna be talking about. He dropped an episode. It was in French. Was it last week or about a week and a half ago now? It's still pretty recent. You dropped an episode there with you did an interview with the president of AS Blainville of the PLSQ.
Yeah, Sylvain Pereira.
Not only that, it was a spicy interview. Is that right, Mike?
It was indeed. It was indeed. For those who don't know, AS Blainville are the three-time defending PLSQ champions, and they have qualified to the Canadian Championship 3 times. And some very, very, very spicy information has been released during that interview. It was in French, so I'm happy to talk about it with you today, Curtis, for our English audience.
Yeah, because I unfortunately I'm not very good at my French. My French is very limited, so I'm very happy to be able to talk. Get your side of things, get your notes that you took here from that interview because. You dropped a little tidbits on there. You dropped a lot of tidbits on that little episode there a couple weeks ago for you there, and I'm excited to hear because you hear Quebec, you hear CPL expansion, your mind automatically associates it with maybe Alex Bunbury, Greater Montreal area, Laval, or Quebec City, right? Am I right on that? Those are pretty much the two places we've always heard about for the last 3 years with CPL Quebec, correct?
Yeah, the places that are the best documented, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And essentially, besides Alex Bunbury, who has been public since fall 2018 about trying to bring a team to Laval, Quebec, we've heard some things about Quebec, but I think the last thing I heard recently, back in January, if I'm not mistaken, we might have even talked about it on your show in the past, is Quebec City possibly getting a team, but I think it was right now the expansion fee, or at least at the time, possibly the expansion fee that was kind of holding back that expansion of a Quebec City club. And now we got this third option that just came out of nowhere, right? It was like a rocket. So explain to me how it all went down, because I'm assuming you probably didn't just ask all as AS Blainville. They're coming to the CPL, right?
So the thing about AS Blainville, for people who don't know, is that the structure that they have, the academy that they have, no club in the current Canadian Premier League can say that they have the same structure. They have a full academy from knee-high all the way up to senior on the men's side as well as the women's side of the game. They have a PLSQ team. They also have a PLSFQ team, which is the women's PLSQ. And they have 2,000 registered members. 2,000 players who are registered under the AS Blainville umbrella. We're talking about from knee-high all the way up to senior, competitive, recreational. They also train coaches, referees. They have their own training grounds, their own stadium, their own classrooms. So really, they're set up like a professional club. The only thing, though, that differentiates them from a Canadian Premier League club is that, and that is something that you will find is very common about PLSQ teams, their current setup is not-for-profit organization, right?
Mm.
They basically finance their operations through donations, through contributions from their members, and what have you. And this is something that every PLSQ team has in common. That being said, because of their success, because of their many titles won over the years, because yes, they've won the PLSQ 3 straight years, but they also won two Quebec doubles, which is the PLSQ league as well as the PLSQ Cup, because there is also a PLSQ Cup. They won that twice. What you need to know about AS Blainville is that they were established in 1986. Their structure is 34 years old. Again, no club, not only in the CanPL, but no club, even in the MLS, can claim to have that kind of longevity. Okay? So when I asked the president of AS Blainville if his ambition and that of his board of directors and that of his members was to eventually make it to the Canadian Premier League, he told me that it was absolutely their dream. The only thing that would be required, obviously, is for an update in their training grounds, an update in their stadium, and obviously their operating costs right now are not that of a Canadian Premier League team. That being said, if there was to be an investor, a third party, who would want to enter into a partnership with AS Blainville, be it formal or type of association type of deal, they would be 100% open for it. And as I said, if Blainville was to enter the Canadian Premier League, they would have the best structure in the entire league. And I'll go even further. If you compare AS Blainville's academy with that of the Montreal Impact, Toronto A.F.C, and the Vancouver Whitecaps, as far as availability at all levels for men and women, I don't think that any of the 11 professional clubs in the entire country can claim to have the structure that AS Blainville has.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible stuff, because I mean, you think, PLSQ, you think these very small community-based clubs, grassroots clubs, they're just there for development. And then you hear this huge thing that, AS Blainville, they have all the stuff, they have all the bones, all the structure, maybe it's on a smaller scale, but like you said, if you inject, if you get a big ownership group that can come in and inject the money in there, update the stadium, update the training ground, I mean, you got to, in a span of a month, you can take that team from PLSQ club all the way, and at the end of the month, turn them into a professional Division 1 club, with the CPL. I mean, this sounds almost like it's, if there is an ownership group out there that wants to take advantage of this situation, they can almost flip this thing in a span of like a month, almost like we've seen in the past with Atletico Ottawa, but probably even sooner, because they have that base, they have that structure, they have coaches, they have contacts. I'm sure they have some really good alum. A recent one like A.F.C there on York 9, there is a player that came from that system, right? So AS Blainville, one of the most successful clubs.
I can name more, Curtis.
Well, did you want to take us through the list of alum?
I can name more players. Yeah, of course. There's Clément Baya of the Montreal Impact, Dia Abzi, as you mentioned, of York 9, Mohamed Farsi of Cavalry, Johan Le Bourris of Valor, Omar Crime of the Halifax Wanderers, and they have a bunch of players who are currently in the Montreal Impact Academy. They even have within their own current roster former Montreal Impact players such as Vendry Lefebvre as well as Pierre-Rudolph Maillard. So if, let's say, the contract of these players were set up differently a year ago, because a year ago no one knew what the CPL would become, right? Mm-hmm. So these players, they all ended up leaving for free, right? A year later, 2 years later, if these players had to go to CPL from the transfer market, maybe 20,000, maybe 40,000 could have been made for each player. And when you look at their transfer market value today, Dia Abzi, for example, his transfer market value is $165,000. If he has another season or 2 other seasons like the one that he had in 2019, and he moves on to the MLS, for example, had AS Blainville signed him to a differently structured contract, maybe they could have gotten 10%, maybe 20% of the resale value. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm realizing with a structure like AS Blainville, because this new step exists in Canada where there is a first division and there is another step where these young professional players could move on and continue their careers. if contracts are structured differently, then perhaps these teams could get something back for developing them for all these years. And I think that that is the key for AS Blainville that's going to get them to the professional level, being able to get something for all these players that they've developed and made it to the professional, or I should say to the first division.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, they got alum, they know how to develop. This almost sounds like a situation where they're kind of like the Sigma FC of Quebec. You know, they're a factory. They're pumping out.
Absolutely.
They're creating. They're developing players. Obviously, they're doing a good job because these players are transitioning perfectly into the professional environment and within a year type situation. Sometimes that takes years for players to understand. Sometimes they never understand that, and never able to mentally switch from maybe an amateur game, let's say, to a professional mentality and that professional environment. And AS Blainville, they're consistently champions of Quebec. They're consistently the class club in the PLSQ, and they're consistently in the Canadian Championship, and they're competitive. I mean, it's not like last year. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly. They played, was it York Knight?
2-1.
They play York Knight,
Yeah.
right? Last year Canadian Championship, and they played them well.
Yeah, and I think they lost either 2-1 or 1-0, something like that. I think it was 1-0 aggregate against York 9.
Yeah, and York 9 was the team that almost defeated Montreal Impact and in the quarterfinals there, and it could have played against Cavalry in the semifinals. So, I mean, that just shows you that it's not that big of a gap between the PLSQ clubs, especially a club like AS Blainville, and the CPL in last year. Maybe things change over time, but overall, I mean, if I'm an investor, if I have all this money and I want a club fast and don't have to invest too much in trying to build a whole structure from the ground up, AS Blainville is almost really just one or two steps ahead of doing that. You know what I mean? They're ahead of the steps that they're going to have to do in a place like Laval or a place like Quebec City. So, I mean, AS Blainville, for me, sounds like the cheaper, better option to go. And they have the history behind them. Like you said, they've been around for over 30 years. I mean, they have the grassroots in that community. I mean, it's perfect. Did the president of Blainville, did he go in any direction? Is there any potential? Has he had any talks with any ownership groups yet?
He wouldn't elaborate on that. What I can say though is that within his own board of directors, the door is wide open, and they're not taking any prisoners when it comes to that particular subject. They're making it well known that they are willing to work with the private sector. Even though they have a not-for-profit setup, they're still open to working with someone from the corporate community.
Yeah, I mean that's perfect. I mean, when you got a group like that, board of directors like that they're free. They're like, yes, we'll talk, we'll strategize with anybody, we'll sit down with anybody, and we'll make this happen. Like they want to make this happen clearly. And speaking on what they've done in development wise, speaking on what they've done on record wise for over 30 years, I mean, this club's got a history of success. I mean, if I'm an ownership group, why wouldn't I want to take advantage of something like that? And like you said, if those contracts were structured differently, could you imagine with the resale value, or who knows, maybe even if they could transfer a player somewhere, they could have been making tons of money. I mean, a guy like A.F.C, like you were mentioning, his value there was $160,000. That was Tristan Borges's value for the longest time last year, and he went for allegedly or in the couple $100,000 range on the transfer market after just 1 year. Could you imagine if AS Blainville had another couple Absies in their system and they came to the CPL?
Well, they actually do, Curtis. If you don't mind me mentioning him, they have a young midfielder by the name of Hoshain Noor Ali, and Hoshain Noor Ali represents Afghanistan in the international scene. And he's a very, very promising midfielder. And don't be surprised if you see him in the Canadian Premier League next year.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, they got the talent there. It's you got a base like that. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer. You know, the stadium. Do you know exactly how big the stadium fits for capacity-wise right now?
It's small. It's less than 1,000, which means that for sure they would have to either renovate their current stadium or maybe move to another location. But at that point, it would all have to be discussed with a potential owner. I don't think that they have the funds to build a 5,000 seater,
Hmm.
Now, in the Montreal area, all 5,000 plus seaters are actually in Montreal. That being said, if someone wants to be part of the adventure, dish out the rumored, what is it, 9 or 10 million franchise fee. Obviously, it would have to come with a certain type of envelope to update the current stadium. Could you get the city on board? Maybe, because AS Blainville has given so much to the city of Blainville over the years
Hmm.
that I wouldn't be surprised if the city of Blainville would be more than motivated to give something back.
Yeah, and I mean, when you got something like that that's been around for literally a generation, spilling over into almost a second generation. I mean, you got the family base. You know what I mean? Like, I almost feel like they could almost have like a unearth a gem here of almost like a Halifax situation where if you build a stadium, they'll come, and that's like you said, they just besides the obviously expansion fee,
Mm.
if the owners put down some more dollars there, they can build a decent structure, and they can do it in a quick amount of time. They rebuilt the Wanderers ground in less than a year. They made tremendous updates for what was it there, West Hill Stadium there, again in a span of only a few months to rebuild that stadium to CPL standards. I can't see why. I mean, this to me just seems like a no-brainer of a situation and of literally a perfect situation for any owner to come in because the job's halfway done.
Yeah, and if I can say a few words, if I could say a few words about the geographic situation of Blainville itself, it is just north of Laval. Just you just need to cross a bridge basically from Laval to Blainville, and Laval is just north of Montreal. And again, you only need to cross a bridge to get from Montreal to Laval. So I I live in Montreal myself. If there was a Canadian Premier League club in Blainville, would I want to go there every second week to watch a home game if I was a season ticket holder? Absolutely, I would. Absolutely, for to see that type of product at that price, because CanPL ticket prices are not MLS ticket prices. That is for sure. Ask people in York what they pay for York 9 games compared to what they pay for TFC games. We're not talking about the same thing at all. And I think that it would be absolutely worth it. And at the same time, you would be supporting local soccer. And I'm sure that, and that's a joke that we make all the time here in Quebec, but there is enough talent in Quebec, especially in the greater metropolitan region of Montreal. There's enough talent to be able to set up a 100% Quebec-based roster in Blainville.
Yeah, and I've seen it before and a bunch of other talent levels growing up and having friends in soccer and stuff. I mean, Quebec's got probably it's very under. I honestly think it's probably produces the best skill players, like in terms of like a medium of a lot of quality, skillful wingers, playmakers. They're all coming from Quebec. They're not really coming from Ontario as many people think they are. Everyone thinks they're from Toronto. No, a lot of those crafty guys are coming from from Quebec, from the province of Quebec. Is there any other interesting tidbits that the president mentioned in that interview?
Yeah, I can think of two things in particular. The first thing that he wanted to really emphasize during this interview is that it's not just about the senior teams, be it the PLSQ team or the PLSFQ team, but it's really their efforts internally are invested into their entire structure. To them, the entire club matters, and he really wanted to emphasize that it's their bread and butter, it's their pride, and it's the reason why they have such successful senior teams. And the other thing that he also emphasized was the fact that he wanted to do better on the women's side of the game, even though he already has a complete structure. Uh, he mentioned to me that he wanted to keep working towards that goal and make sure that these girls have a shot at achieving their dream, which is to either represent their country in the international scene, or play professionally, or pursue a university career in order to play university sports as well as getting an education.
And yeah, I mean that's great. That's not just about the soccer on the pitch. It's expanding it. It's growing it. It's going through the different levels, the depth of the system here. And I mean, everything you just said was fantastic. I mean, they obviously have a system in place. They obviously know what they want to do, not just in the present, but in the future, and what they want to continue to grow and continue to do. I mean, this club's as grassroots, it seems, as you can get. And they're even essentially more grassroots than any professional club we currently have in Canada. And that's already a great start. So, again, if you are an owner, if for whatever reason, if my reach is so big and AS Roma's ownership is watching this, or some big club in Europe is watching this, or some big possible investor in Canada is watching this, AS Blainville right now looks like it should be the next Quebec club or Quebec city to get in Quebec, let's say, that could be joining the CPL there. I want to thank you, Mike, though, for joining me for today's episode to discuss this great topic here we discussed today. Do you want to tell everybody at home where they can find you?
Of course. So the Premier podcast is going through its COVID-19 marathon. Episodes are released pretty much every single day. You can find it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram using the handle at CPL Podcast. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other application where you usually listen to your favorite podcasts.
Yeah, and I fully endorse this guy's podcast. It's one of the best Canadian podcasts for Canadian soccer out there, both English and French content every week. So
And
it covers all of Canada. What was that, Mike?
And it's free.
And it's free. Who doesn't love free? All right, Mike. Well, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for getting that memo with that red shirt. And we'll see you guys later. And of course, guys, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can see more content just like this with me and Mike talking about great expansion stuff like this. So let us know in the comment section below if there's anything else, any questions or stuff you want to bring up there for you guys out there in the TV universe and the YouTube universe. And until next time, guys, you can find us and our content over at Northern Starting 11, the website, great website over there for Canadian soccer content. Other than that, guys, though, we'll check you guys later.